So we're not going live yet?
No, we are live.
Oh, okay.
That's fine.
Eh.
I can always crop this part.
Pull that one out. There we go. Right.
I'll moderate comments.
Cool. Brian, so we just got to check and tell me if I'm more or less center.
Ever so slightly left stop.
Right, can you see toes? Head to toe?
I can't see with the thingy
Oh,
in
no,
the
no,
way.
no, don't take it out of there. Okay. Cool. Suppose it is what it is, hey? Onegaishimasu! Welcome back to the Goju Karate Center. I'm sorry, I'm a little bit far away and I might have to use outdoor voice just so that you can hear me. We're doing a live stream. It's kind of been a crazy week. We have an event tomorrow, so our students have been keeping us on our toes and we've had to plan and prep and have all the boxes ready to haul everything to our event tomorrow. So live stream instead of a video because obviously the editing takes a chunk out of our weekly routine. So wherever you are in the world, thank you for joining us. Don't forget to like, subscribe, leave some comments. Look out for this when it becomes a video in a few hours or a few days time, and then maybe repost your comments because the live stream comments I don't think are preserved, sadly. So sometimes those are super fantastic. So since Zoe will be in the background shortly to do a little bit of moderation and checking that everything's okay. So I'm going to come a little bit closer, and in fact I might just move the camera. I don't know how well this is going to show up for most people out there, but in our dojo we tend to do something called the Senpai-kohai teaching method from time to time. And for outsiders, if anybody who's not a seasoned member of a dojo happens to come in and sit, and they'll notice that like maybe the orange belts are teaching the white belts, and the green belts are teaching the yellow belts, and a blue belt is teaching a green belt somewhere on the side. And I can imagine some parents going, what the heck is going on? And we have this on a regular basis where we have helpers or students helping us with classes, and they come in and they float around and they help correct the position and things like that. And we call this Senpai-kohai, in alignment with what is peer teaching in Japan, where the senior students in the class, male or female, are called senpai, and the junior students are called kohai. And so we have the senpai-kohai relationship that we're trying to nurture in our own kind of fashion here in South Africa in our dojo. A couple of good reasons why we do it. Number one, it helps build our dojo's esprit de corps. The camaraderie that comes from it, especially amongst adults, is incredibly important. The stronger the camaraderie between the students, the better the vibe in the dojo, and the more likely students are going to hang around. Two, when you teach, you learn twice, maybe even 3 times, all right? Because you have to think about what you're doing a little bit more than if you're just practicing. And so to share that knowledge and to show it back is, in its own right, some kind of learning experience. It's been erased, but we have an idea that it helps us also figure out who's kind of working compatibly with somebody else. You tend to find that people gravitate towards similar-minded and similar able-bodiedness types of people. So my older students generally come together and they train together at their pace. My younger, more vigorous students train together. The little wild ones are always together, and sometimes you have to separate them out because they just create chaos. And then if I go on this side, it's a little bit of succession proofing. Sometimes you will hear a notion that, you know, the sensei is leaving, or the sensei is moving out the area. I can't carry on with karate because there's only my sensei is my sensei. It's the only one sensei, and there's nobody else. And so people are lost, and dojos close, and there's no continuation. Succession proofing in a dojo is incredibly important because it helps keep whatever art you're doing, whether it's karate or taekwondo or jiu-jitsu or whatever, it helps keep it alive. And so you want to have high quality people, high quality students developing in the background so that one day if something goes pear-shaped, they can take over. A very simple analogy, sensei has got a wife and children, and let's say somebody gets hurt and he has to go to the hospital, but classes still need to run. What is the likelihood that the sensei can immediately say to a couple of students, right, you're going to do this, make a phone call, send a WhatsApp or a message to somebody and say, can you fill in for me, and know with absolute confidence that the young black belt will walk in, take over the dojo, teach all the classes as if sensei was sitting in the room, and that the dojo carries on operating. And that's very important because sometimes these things happen. And then finally, it is to teach coachability, which is very important in the sports world, but it is also equally important in the dojo environment. As a young boy training, maybe 12 years old, Ichikyu, third brown belt, getting ready for black belt, my sensei would often ask me to do an introductory class for a beginner student, sometimes even adults. And on one particular occasion, one of the adults very disappointingly shook his head and walked inside and cornered sensei. He was like, hey, how can you let me learn from this child? And it was this idea that I'm paying you the money, I expect you to do the work. And cool, calmly, sensei just looked at him and said, if you can't learn from that child, how do you expect to learn from me? And the guy left. And I looked at sensei, I said, sensei, I know I'm naughty and everything else. What did I do wrong? He said, nothing. That person just would not learn from anybody else. So a couple of good reasons for Senpai-kohai in the dojo. It's something that we do on a regular basis. We nurture this. I know in some schools the senpai is the assistant, and so they attach the idea of assistant instructor to the word senpai. I think this is a deviation from the original idea of what senpai is. Usually it's a peer group, and it is the most senior person in the peer group is the senpai, other than the teacher. So, all right, let's get on with some karate. So, Brian, let's go. Let's do some karate. I'm just moving the camera to about here, and let's just make sure we're a little bit square. Cool. Hey, onegaishimasu. Onegaishimasu. So this week in the dojo, we were working with some blasphemy. We were doing nai hanshi or nai funshin kata, and the idea of how methodology works is that you start with something small and manageable, and then you take it up. So we started off with like the simple idea: I'm standing, I'm doing this. Brian grabs onto my jacket, and I go, oh, okay, hectic, and I give him a yank, and then I give him a crank. All right. So I grab and I pull, and I immediately step into him, and I just whack him. And this is like the opening move of nai funshin. All right, and so we did this a couple of times, and the students were getting this idea of pull. All right, you can also, there are a lot of people out there who like the idea of locks, and you try and create a lock. And in doing this, what I'm doing is I'm straightening his arm, which means I'm getting a bit short. So there are a couple of ideas around. If he grabs on, it's the idea of grabbing and pulling him in. And so this hand coming in and pulling, it's really like opening, pull, and you're like, okay, cool. And now you can do all the hypothetical stuff, so it's this pull, and then maybe you do an elbow strike. But the reality is, we've got to ask ourselves, why is he grabbing on? And simple reality is, if somebody grabs on, chances are they're going to be grabbing you, pulling you, and hitting you. So Brian is grabbing, he's pulling, and he's hitting. And so that hand, that is just simply an opening movement, basically becomes the setup for this. So if Brian grabs on and he takes that hit, I can block and try and hit, and I can have these short striking type movements where it's this kind of just relaxed and heavy. Now that's like a little stepping stone, but afterwards you start saying, well, he's grabbed, he's in the motion of fighting, so he sees this coming and he might get around it, he might bob or weave, and as he bobs and weaves, you're sliding in and you're hitting. At this point, I'm obviously being an idiot because I've stayed in one position. And so the next thing is, now everybody's got an idea of what their hands are going to do, we change the angle of the attack. So Brian comes in and he attacks, and so I move. And now, because I've changed the angle of the attack, what I've essentially done is I have changed the nature of his energy. And I can be like, okay, that's pretty cool. I'm moving around with this idea. So we move on, and he grabs on, and so I move, and okay, so I did a 1, and now the intention might be a 2 or a 3, and around. And at this point, I'm maybe pommeling Brian and holding on, okay, because I want to entrap and ensnare and hit him as many times as possible so that maybe he leaves and I can go a different direction. And so we build this idea, if he does nothing, I just keep hitting him. So it's like a self-defense idea that if I go 1 and I do this and Brian does nothing, I might just keep hitting him until he does something. He either puts a hand up or he slips around, and then something else is going to happen. And as this is happening, now something else is going to happen, and so we can move on. So where I went with my students was, I'd like to snip that section off there and complete it. So if you had to do I would be getting to something like this cup and saucer kind of movement, and it's this round kind of movement. So we do something a little bit more brutal, and so he does 1, 2, 3, and I grab his head and turn, and I kind of want to take him down. And this might not be everybody's cup of tea, and it definitely won't work on the street because the guy's never going to hang around that long. But the reality is that I'm busy training myself for the eventuality that if something presents itself that is remotely similar, I have the idea, all right, maybe I can do this. So I'm trying to train myself to have that moment of clarity in combat that I can execute one part of this. In the last couple of days, I saw a comment on one of our basics videos, and we had obviously covered 1, 2, 3, and somebody was like, none of that is important, it's terrible, it doesn't work. And I was like, maybe you should watch the rest of our videos, just because we all know that this is a foundation, and these are composite ideas. They're not complete ideas, they're not singular ideas, they're composite, they're multifaceted. And so when I practice this, I'm practicing a whole variety of things. Same thing is applying here. At a self-defense kind of point of view, you have to appreciate that you need to have a certain amount of realism, and so your partner's going to fight back, going to resist, is going to hit back at you and do those kind of things. But what I'm trying to do is I'm just trying to do a little bit of basic kind of bunkai and have a systematic methodology in creating something that's going to stick. Now my job, I'm a teacher. Got to get the information to stick so that at a certain point when you get into a situation, if you've done it 100 or 200 or 300 times, that information is here, it can come out. It's never going to be identical, it's never going to be exactly the same, but you'll be able to adjust and improvise and adapt. That's another reason for constantly changing what we're doing as we're doing bunkai. And not just doing one bunkai, we're actually teaching change and adaptation. They're the only 2 constants in everything. There's always change, and the only solution to change is adaptation. So we can't be fixed in one place. All right, so I digress enough. We got to here. Now we're doing this kind of thing. So we decided we make this a second bunkai, and this bunkai very, very basic idea at first would be, I'm standing up minding my own business, this villain, this thug, decides he's going to kick me, and as he kicks, I'm going to just pull my hand out the way, and then I'm going to hit him in the groin. And the idea that this hand is coming at this level means I'm probably going to clock him in the face. And I started to bring out the idea that maybe if you look at your kata and you look at the dominant hand, and Naifunshin or Teki or Naihanchi, whichever name you choose to use, if this is the dominant hand, everybody neglects the hand that's doing the other stuff. And so maybe you need to concentrate a little bit on what that hand is doing. So in the case of the Gedan Barai, I'm working on the idea of I'm maybe moving my body to create the first block. So as the kick comes, I'm moving my body, and then I'm using a short shot. And then my hand is coming to chamber. But in reality, what am I doing? I'm grabbing, I'm pulling up, and then hitting. So that is going to immediately, if I hit him there, he's going down. That's making my life that much easier. And then I decided, well, if I'm going to have a supplementary kata, and I'm going to break all the rules by doing bunkai for a supplementary kata, well, maybe the bunkai doesn't have to follow exactly the order of the kata. And so we started to play with the idea that humans are inflexible. So Brian's going to do the bad kick now, the non-karate kick. So he's going to step up and take like an up and under. If you understand the game of rugby, that's where we kick the ball and we punt it from one side of the field. Okay, you try to kick the ball high up in the air. So this is the up and under style kick, which is usually the kick that most people would use because you minded your business. This person's decided to kick you in the groin. Come this way with Brian. All right, so I'm minding my business. Brian does the up and under. So you now have this leg here, and that strike is there. I let his foot land, and then I want to try and create a tap. And in creating this tap, he's inflexible. And now if I go to the other side, and so we had a little bit of fun with that because we have some adults who are really inflexible in our beginners class. And, you know, they got to about here, and then they were going, no more. So, because they realized if they're going to the splits, they can walk the next day. Slightly more advanced would be the idea of if Brian is kicking, I'm gathering and trying to sweep. All right. The problem with this is my face is perpetually open, so you would probably find that the idea is that the hand is a very soft kind of tap, and so we move away from like a traditional kind of bunkai, and it becomes, oh, okay, maybe I set like this, and Brian does the kick, and so 1, 2, and you can see the overextension, what it creates. Now, instead of doing Gedan Barai, do Gedan Barai, my hand is just going to go here, and what we didn't get to in class was, all right, so I just maneuvered myself to a position, and the idea, I have two hands, and sometimes I don't have to block with the lead hand, but I can block with the back hand. So if we're standing and the kick comes, I might kick and shift, because the best block don't be there, so Brian comes 1, come on, Brian, just step down. You don't have to slow down too much. Go. 1, 2, 3. Okay. And now we're in this kind of position. And we have these nice ribs. Okay, so this kind of idea for this. And it's just playing with the idea. You might not do it exactly that way. You might be standing and the person grabs on. Grab on arms. Yeah, like we want to wrestle, Brian. So we're kind of getting into this idea, and for some other reason you're able to get yourself behind. Now most people will go this way, but sometimes you might find you get in the reverse way. And in doing this, you're opening your mind, which is another important reason why we have supplementary kata. Without breaking the rules of the federation you belong to, that it allows you to explore and to break all the rules, and you haven't done anything bad. You haven't gone and violated one of the school's kata or some sensei's teachings, which are so solidly written in stone, they're kind of like law. I think that you need to have the ability to explore and to change your way of thinking and to be challenged. And in doing that, you start finding a little bit more and more out about your karate and about yourself, which is the ultimate goal to a certain degree, because if you know what you can or what you can't do and you have a clear sense of your own ability, that puts you usually in a better, and I'm not talking about a fictitious, like egotistical, like I'm so big and strong, nobody can beat me, but you really understand that you have, I have a blind spot here, I have a weakness with this, I'm stronger at this and I'm weak at that. It should put you in a better position to win in some kind of confrontation, because you've got to pick from your ability and allow the interaction to become something that you dominate. All right, and that's tactical and strategical thought. So we've gotten to this kind of part of the kata, and we'd already added in this, so we were playing with the idea of these kind of little blocks, and Brian, I'm sorry, you know it's gonna hurt. All right, and the idea was, okay, I've broken so many rules already. I'm minding my own business, and he throws a haymaker. And the idea is that you've got this one hand that's just kind of loosely hanging there. So I'm standing, I've got my guard up. Let's come this way a bit, Brian. And Brian throws the haymaker. And so I've got the block. Then this hand that was underneath is that first punch. All right. So I'm doing 1, 2. That's like really nice, dirty fighting. And we decided we'd try and tweak it a little bit. So we then went with the idea that if we were blocking this way and hitting with this, we were going to change it because we didn't want it to be a punch, we were going to make it into an elbow. So our next idea was we're standing and Brian throws, and so I'm stepping in and it's an elbow. And the immediate kind of response is, well, maybe it slips past or goes over his head, but more importantly, my ribs are open. And so as he does the punch, I'm dropping that arm and now I'm clocking him with this hand. And then if I wanted to, I could be attacking that leg. So the tie-in between I've skipped a whole lot, but from there and there kind of ties in quite nicely. And so we played with this for a bit, and the students were having a really good time, but they were starting to get like into some really nice ideas. So you were starting to see people going 1, 2 straight away and attacking the groin, which I love because it's something we taught in the dojo a few weeks ago. We need to take a step back. We need to go to a little bit more classical karate. He decides to punch to my chest. So as he punches, I do my chest block, sideways block. And then I'm going to use the stepping that I use in a triangle drill all the time, and that we kind of encourage in our Andori videos, which is to move out of the range of the next attack. So Brian now attacks, because I've done this and I've pressed down and I'm going, hey, how's it going? Maybe I'm hitting him or whatever. The most attractive, lucrative thing for him is that face shot. And so as that face shot comes in, I'm just moving in and I'm grabbing on with one hand, so block, grab, and strike. And because I like to view the world through the paradigm of Goju, the idea of pulling an uppercut straight away is super important for me because I want to hit him with a flurry of blows. So Brian, let's do it on the other side. So as he punches, it's like kind of classical karate, 1, and then the next attack comes 2, and I hit, and not with a big pullback, but a little yank, and then a punch. And then obviously if you wanted to, you could move to the next move. But this arm and hand here, that's kind of that trapping motion. And I know everybody's saying, well, why don't you just change direction? And so we start creating this unbalancing effect, bringing our opponent down onto the ground, and the dynamic will change again. And then we end up in a tussle on the floor, and it ends up looking like a real fight. So we, in the process of using knife friction, one of the other tenets of the class we gave this last week in the dojo was the idea that we were building on a class we had done a week earlier where we were trying to bridge from standing up and fighting to taking down, and our mechanism of teaching that was simply through kaki. And the idea of One, maybe distortion. All right, the idea of putting it down. These ideas coming from there. And then you're bridging the idea. There's this point of contact where your arms are interacting. There's a sensitivity to balance. And it's this vital link that Kaklie creates. So we're trying to build on that because we're trying to find the best way for a person who wears angry white pajamas or karate practitioner would kind of bridge the gap between stand-up fighting and taking the person down, a little bit of judo or a little bit of throwing, for those people who don't realize that that's actually still just karate, and then fighting on the ground, whether it is something that resembles grappling or is just another way of doing karate on the floor. And so we're trying to create this constant link, and we're trying to get people to understand that you can be standing up, punching and kicking, and for some other reason, somebody ends up in a grab, and this becomes not a grabbing competition where it now changes, but you know, technically if I'm doing randori and I grab, Brian's best solution is to actually hit or kick me because it's going to force me to block. And my idea is how do we get around that? So this is where thinking about your karate classes kind of lends itself to. And so a small insight into the operations, the kind of go around mindset of an instructor would be, why is Sensei teaching this class on Monday? And what's the link on the class on Wednesday? And what has that got to do with the class that maybe Sensei is giving on Saturday? And is there a common theme? And what is that theme? And how does it make me better? And as an instructor, you should be asking yourself that exact same question. How do I teach Monday's class, Wednesday's class, Friday's class? How do I get that progression? And over the progression, how do I improve the overall standard of my student or students? How do I get them to improve what they're doing and to get them to grow? And at the same time, very importantly, have fun, because it doesn't have to be a grind all the time. Have a little bit of grind, that it's a workout, and when everybody leaves, everybody has learned something, had fun, has sweated a bit, has blown off their stress. And that way the guys and the ladies are still coming back for more classes. So the reason I moved through the kaki and the previous class, because it helps understand where we're going with the last bunkai. And the last bunkai for us had a very, very basic idea, with Brian maybe punching, and I'm just kind of moving out the way. I'm trying to absorb it, I'm catching onto it, and I'm grabbing on and I'm pulling. And as I'm pulling, now I'm opening him up for this and this. And then we start talking about the importance of just tapping the makiwara, short punches, to develop power and developing hip. All right, Brian, how's it feel? And this is the idea of I hit you, and I hit you 3 or 4 times in quick succession, and hopefully that irritates you enough to say, oh, maybe I should leave. All right? So the idea is, well, this is a catch, one hand on top of the other, maybe. I'm trying to do something. Maybe Brian grabs my hand and I'm doing the same thing. So the idea being, as he grabs on, 1, 2, 3. After I hit, I'm back here because this is control. All right, then my hands come together because I'm finishing the kata. So do my feet. And now my opponent is on the ground. And hopefully then I've got something that's super cool that we can do that allows us to have an end to our combat. And I can walk away and that person will leave me alone. So, hey Brian, thank you very much for helping me demonstrate what we did this week. Our classes this week, that's my adult class I gave on Thursday and a little bit of my adult class that I gave probably last week and Thursday, kind of in a nutshell. I hope you enjoyed a little bit of live stream and a little bit of sharing, unrehearsed, unplanned, but somewhat trained in the classes this week and last week. The ideas of what we do to teach, how we go about things. I'm probably going to sign off now. I have to go to another training session. at another dojo, and I will check out the comments. I hope you all enjoyed it, whoever was watching. Thank you. Don't forget, like, subscribe, leave a comment. Cheers. Arigato gozaimasu. Have an awesome weekend. Okay. Now, how to press stop.